Marco Reus. Daniel Malen! Wonderful!
Fantastic from Royce. Jude Bellingham, that's excellent. Jude Bellingham, this is absolutely brilliant. Jude Bellingham! Absolutely magnificent.
Reina, brilliant from the American. Just like that.
Graceful. Sally Hurts down for Anthony Modeste.
Not a bad idea. And there it is for Coco. For Borussia Dortmund. The long wait is over. Unbridled joy in the Revier Derby.
Hey, welcome back to the BVB podcast. My name's Jake, joined as always by Carver, and it's been a bit. If Carver and I said on the show that we're going to take a little break for the summer, I think we took maybe a longer break than what we initially thought, but it's good to have some time off. I want to say a lot of stuff has happened with Dortmund. Maybe not as much as we hoped is how I'm feeling a little bit, but we do have a special guest joining us to get into this like summer update, Brian Straub, who's been on the show quite a few times, and we're extremely happy to have you back, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to be back. As I always say, it's always fun recording with you guys, so I'm ready to talk some BVB.
Dortmund? Not Dortmund. I meant to just say Carver, and I said Dortmund. Son of a bitch.
You can refer to me that. It's fine.
Master Dortmund, how are you doing, Carver?
Recently I'm doing better. Just strictly from, I guess, we're talking about Dortmund here. For the majority of the summer, at least until recently, I felt pretty underwhelmed and a bit despondent as well, to be honest. Now, I don't want to rehash any like trauma from that day back in May, but you'd expect Dortmund to use the devastation and the heartbreak as motivation to come together and light a fire under this club, the players and its fan base. And some players are doing just that. Don't get me wrong. Like Brandt said to the media recently that he mentioned he used that Mainz game as motivation, him and Schlotterbeck both. I can't speak for other players. I don't know if they are or not, but the overall complacency from the board has made this summer, again, until recently, feel just pretty uninspiring. And that's mostly directed at Watzke and co, not just necessarily Kale, but it's not just from a sporting perspective either. But first it was losing Jude Bellingham, and given the player profile he is and how classy he is in almost every measurable metric, the club tries to somewhat fill that void. And some of our primary targets fell through or it grew cold after the first month or so. And then there was this clash of ideas between Kale and Terzic with recruitment. And of course, you have the Nemecha drama and the club completely disregarding the Grundwertekodex, the club's code of core values. And it's just been a pretty frustrating and underwhelming summer, again, until just recently. But hanging in there, trusting in Kale, letting him cook.
And we are going to talk about the signings so far and dive a little deeper into those coming up. But Brian, like your take on the summer, and I guess how like coming off, you don't have to get into everything about the collapse at the end, but like I guess how's your summer been? How do you feel like summer's been going?
Yeah, the summer's been fine. I mean, as you mentioned, the collapse and all that, the first couple of weeks were pretty emotional. I mean, obviously, we expected more out of that game, but things happened the way they did, and you can't cry over spilled milk forever. But as Carver already mentioned, with the signings and everything that's gone on since, you would expect there to be a bit more of a reaction. And so far, up until recently, it has felt a little bit uninspired, I guess you can say. And yeah, there's definitely more expectation for some of the deals that did quote unquote fall through. I mean, we really don't know the ins and outs of whether or not, they were actually hot targets or whatever for the club. We have whatever media speculation we were served, basically. But yeah, having those fall through kind of made the whole summer start to feel almost as if there wasn't an aim to any of the plans. So yeah, I mean, it's been a very different summer from what I would have expected from the club coming off of a season where you almost won the title, so.
Of course, we've had some preseason games under our belt. I didn't get a great look at them. I caught some highlights here and there. 3 wins against lower division teams, which is one thing that stuck out. I don't know if you guys want to mention preseason games or anything that stuck out to you guys. I just like that it's preseason. Obviously, we're playing some of the youth and testing them out, which is cool. Royce is in there banging goals a few times. But again, I didn't watch much of these games. I know we've got a little more exciting games coming up with Man U and Chelsea. We'll hit on those a little bit later. But Carver, anything from preseason before we start talking signings? Because I mean, some of the guys have gotten some action too, but preseason thoughts real quick.
Yeah, I have only caught moments here and there in the games. One of them I missed completely. I was out of town and didn't get to catch them. But again, like you mentioned, against lower division teams, I know we also almost lost 2 of them, at the very least almost tied a few of them. And I have a quote here actually from Terzic after one of the last ones saying, "We lost an extremely large amount of balls, and we didn't like that. But the good thing is today's game should be a warning to us. Exactly such an opponent waits us in the first round of the Pokal." And I'm glad he's at least, which, you would expect him to be, but I'm glad he's conscious of that, of, some of these players need to start getting in the right headspace, because the new season is right around the corner and the Pokal is very close now. So, we're already getting ready to go here.
And like I said, I think the games coming up are going to be a little more serious. I think these ones, it is a good, I guess I have mixed feelings. I'm I want to see you just kind of embedding the guys in, and I think he is doing that, but it's a lot more testing the youth and maybe seeing which guys have a chance at the first team, which guys will be kind of BVB2 and younger. But I think we do have the next few games to get a little more ready, a little more serious. Brian, I know you mentioned you didn't watch them either, but any thoughts from seeing lineups or anything out of these matches?
I mean, there's only so much, I guess, we can garner from these preseason games. Like we said, they're kind of just part of the preseason, trying to see where everyone's going to fit in. And I don't necessarily take too much stock out of the performances. I mean, they're just coming off a vacation. So it's more just a warm up. What I'm going to personally start looking at more so to see is, once they've had a couple of these games under the belt, and it comes closer to late August, early September, when the season starts going, maybe with the first Pokal game, I think that'll be more so a better gauge of where the team is at. Because like I said, right now it's all kind of just seeing where everyone fits, letting some of the younger players get a chance. So yeah, I mean, that's all I really have to say about that.
Yeah, and since we've already mentioned them a couple times already, let's talk about the signings we've got. And unless I'm missing a few, you think my notes should treat me well, but I've been enjoying summer and haven't been. I almost took a little break, not from Dortmund, but I mean a little bit from Dortmund. I just haven't been
that would be warranted.
Yeah,
I haven't been as in the weeds as I probably should, since we're sitting down and doing a podcast about it. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind, Carver, you kind of mentioned it too, is lackluster. It's a little is that all? What? And not really knowing, I don't really know what the direction is, and haven't been too excited at the things I've seen so far. So, I mean, the first one was Benzabaini coming in at left back for Guerrero. On a free. I guess let's start with these individually. And I guess my concern, I know we had some questions about fullback and left back, or fullbacks. Maybe we'll add that question in here too. But I don't understand. I don't hate the Benzabaini. I don't know why we sent Tom Rota out on loan, just bringing in one left back. And that's my, do we need to sign another one now? I feel like he was our depth, or looking to be the depth this year, because we've seen a little bit from him before. And so I'm just expecting a little more in that position a bit. But I mean, Benzabaini overall, don't hate it, but it doesn't get me super excited.
Vatska specifically has mentioned that the club conceded too many goals last year, and they're looking to improve in that department for the defense. Yeah, I mean, Tom Rota, I think he's going to be getting a good experience in the second division. Now it's just a matter of, are we going to add any more reinforcements? Because I think the back line definitely needs some addings right now. I haven't seen too much. I think just as of late, there's a Stuttgart player that we're looking at. I forget, I think his name was Josh Wagnerman or something like that.
Joshua Wagnerman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like he could play both positions. He'd be a solid signing. I feel like I haven't seen too much of him play. Yeah, I mean, Benzabaini, we know how this, we've been looking at Benzabaini for a long time now, before even this transfer window. So we knew that one was coming, but yeah, it just kind of gives you the feeling again of a little unambitious and not that creative either. But again, it was kind of almost makeshift so far, with the summer of so many things going awry and there being clash of ideas. So it's not so much of a clear vision at the moment, but yeah, it's a free signing and another proven experienced Bundesliga player for Benzabaini. I'm excited to see if he can rise up to the occasion here.
Yeah, I think with Bensebaini, it's obviously maybe not the most exciting signing, but from a financial standpoint and from an experience standpoint, it does make sense. Proven Bundesliga player, a bit more defensive than Rafael Guerrero was.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what they're aiming for with that signing, someone that's a bit more physical that can actually help the back line out a little bit more. Granted, he's not the perfect signing, for what it is and for the market these days, it's not the worst signing. So I think I'm kind of like with what you were saying, Jake. It's not exactly something you hate, but it's not exactly something that'll get you super excited. I think that's been the theme overall over the course of, these signings over this summer, barring Sabitzer, which we'll obviously get into a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, with regards to the left back situation, I don't necessarily feel as worried for that as I do for the right back situation. I think left back is relatively well covered, considering Bensebaini is likely going to be our starter, and then we have Ryerson who can play on both sides, so he's likely going to be the main backup there. What I do think the club is going to aim for is, like Carver already mentioned, Joshua Wagnerman. He's likely more of a target for the right back position, which I think is something that's a little bit more dire in terms of rebuild, because if you look at the types of players we have there right now with Thomas Meunier, Marius Wolf, and Mateo Morey, I mean, none of these players are really in the position to, be a starter in that position. I mean, Meunier is basically 1 foot out the door. Wolf, we've seen, can cut it against, I guess, what you would call a more average team. I don't think he can cut it against, higher level opposition, either in the Bundesliga or in the Champions League. And then Mateo Morey, granted, he has shown that he could likely be or possibly be a promising player in that position. His injuries just don't let him show that on a regular basis. So I feel that's something more so that they're going to focus on in terms of kind of re-upping and getting more players in that position, rather than, focusing in on left back, which they're kind of already covered in.
Yeah, and the player profiles, you kind of get the sense too that that's not exactly what Terzic fancies. He's looking like he favors more of the physical, bigger players, stronger, not afraid to get themselves into challenges, and Morey and is not exactly that player at the moment. And, Wolf has his moments, but yeah, I don't know if you can really rely on him to be at a high level, at least on a consistent basis. I'm not really sure it's how you win really any silverware, but
I did want to give a shout out because we got a question on this topic. So while we're on it, Van Persie enthusiast said, "Is it a good idea to rely on Wolf as the RB right back starter, left back backup? Or does it make sense to get another fullback?" I know we kind of mentioned that, but like to extend on that question, and I know you mentioned Ryerson. Like I see him as the starting right back, so that's where I'm more. And I know we've seen him start on the left or switch to the left. But I almost see him as a starting right back, and so you bring in Bensebaini, and then that's where I'm confused. Like, where's the depth? Like, and that's why I feel we need to sign someone else, because I see it like Ryerson as a starter on the right side instead of like the left side backup.
I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from with that. I mean, obviously, Ryerson has shown that he's a lot better than anyone could have really expected coming from Union Berlin. I mean, he was a solid player for them, but he definitely stepped up to Dortmund's level and showed that he can play on a really high level. I still don't know if I'm convinced that he's a starter, game in, game out. Like, he's definitely a fighter, definitely a very energetic player. But I do think that there needs to be at least a bit more competition in that right back position too. Like, even if we're putting Ryerson there, there's no one there to back him up anyway. So I feel like there has to be someone else that comes in that right back position and either starts in that position or pushes Ryerson in that vein.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what Ryerson's ceiling is going to be in these coming years, because I mean, he's really impressed me so far, and I know he's obviously not so much of an offensive threat, but I think he's also very much impressed me with his ability on the ball with his weaker foot, and at times too just his technique as well. So I'm curious to see where he can improve, because right now, it's definitely a possibility for me, depending on the day of him being that starter.
Yeah, I remember when he first signed, and Carver, I remember having multiple conversations of just like being surprised, I guess, at his level, and then he, like, I think after the first game, I was like, I think he's just running on adrenaline, and it felt like he never stopped, He never slowed down. But it does feel like we've kind of like, you don't know if his ceiling goes any higher than maybe what we've seen, and maybe he was overachieving a bit in this season. And yeah, the question is, can he go more? Can he be that first team player that we need? And I think he showed some glimpses, but yeah, again, it's like, where's that ceiling? Maybe we've seen it. which because I think if you look at the profile of the signing too, like he was pretty cheap, and like he didn't seem to be on like a ton of people's radar. So like, was that just a sneaky one, or is it just the type of player from like have teams been scouting him before and didn't see enough, and then we just like we're fortunate to get something out of him? Don't really know. There's that question mark there, but yeah, definitely. I think we need some more depth and some more options in those positions. The question is, are we gonna make a move?
Yeah.
And then moving on to the next signing, Carver. I think I'm just gonna let you handle this one because I know you got a lot of thoughts.
I mean, we've already said plenty about this player. I think we really overspent on him. I mean, strictly all the controversy aside, wow, the price. I mean, when the rumors were initially coming out, it was talks of, I mean, 10 sounded low, but 10, 15 for a few days, bumped it up after another week or so, 20, 25. Here at the end of the day with the total package deal, we're spending about 30 million euros on Mecha from Wolfsburg, which is pretty outrageous in my opinion. I don't see what Terzic, or I guess the rest of the coaching staff sees in him, again, strictly from a sporting perspective, to earn that sort of deal. But besides, I guess just fitting that profile that Terzic wants of having the more physicality in the midfield. I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm not saying that at all, but just 30 million is a lot. And I think it could have been reinvested, I guess, elsewhere, or at least in a different sort of player. Especially one that wouldn't make our fan base so incredibly toxic for this whole summer so far. But also getting people to tell on themselves too, which is always fine. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my thoughts on it.
Yeah. It's, we've had a lot of conversations about, Felix and Mecha, off the record. But yeah, it's definitely not, just strictly speaking, sporting wise, definitely not a very, inspiring signing, in my opinion. I think the price was definitely, inflated. I mean, granted, are we really surprised with the market as it is? But considering that, look, when we try to sign players from the Bundesliga, I feel like Dortmund does try and look more so to cut a good deal. It's just surprising that the price managed to get as high as it did. And I mean, I've been saying this, all summer, basically. There's numerous other players that the club could have targeted. Granted, they might have not the exact same profile as Nemecha or Jude Bellingham, because I mean, you're not gonna replace Jude 1-for-1. And I think it's something that that Brandt said in a recent interview as well, that you're not going to replace his output. You're not going to replace what what Jude did for the team with any singular player.
Right.
But I mean, even just looking at some of Wolfsburg's dealings, in the advent of us purchasing the Mecha, they targeted Lovro Meyer from Rennes, I believe, and he himself is a wonderful player. I mean, watching him play, like, people have compared him to Luka Modric down the line, that he would eventually end up even being his successor at Real Madrid. Is that going to be the case? I don't know, but that's the comparisons that people have thrown out there. So seeing them take a player like that and try to go after him using the money we spent for Mecha is just, I don't know. It's interesting to see. There was also Maxence Cacare that I believe that we were linked to, and he's a phenomenal player as well. Did a whole piece on him with regards to why he would be a good option for Dortmund as well. And it's just interesting because I feel like we could have gotten these players for a similar price point to do a similar job, and yet we decided to go for Nemecha for whatever reasons, be it that he's German and he might stay longer, with the whole argument being that, German players want to stay in Germany and all that. I just think it's interesting that we went for him. I guess maybe it's because he played for Manchester City's academy. We can't get away from those players. So I don't know.
Right. And you know what? I'd argue I could do one even better. Schiri from Cologne went to Frankfurt on a free transfer. I mean, I know a lot of times the club is pretty obsessed with those free transfers and saving money. I mean, that would have been another great grab for very little money. So it's a head scratcher financially. And from a sporting perspective, same way. It's very, very out of nowhere and weird.
The price on this one, I mean, I think everyone knows all this has happened, right? I mean, I don't want to say like it's in the past, I'm not trying to move on from that, but it's like I know everyone had their rants and raves on Twitter. Like it feels like it's been a month now, so like I'm not trying to rehash any of that. Just on the price is crazy. The price was crazy, and when you're looking at like was it Alvarez at the time, and that seemed like that was too high of a price, and then we spent the same amount of money, basically, maybe slightly different player profile. I don't know, but my only not upside, but like optimistic outlook is like he is young, and I think this comes down to not only as a player but as a person. Like I think there's a lot of room for growth in both areas, and hopefully he comes out and he performs well, and he maybe comes out and says, I don't know, just he has personality changes without getting into anything. You know what I'm saying? Like he's young, he's got time to grow. Hopefully he can prove us wrong. He's a Dortmund player now. I don't think I'm going to be boycotting games every week because of anything. Like I'm going to back the team. I don't love all the decisions that have been made, but like it's still Dortmund is still our team, and I'm still going to be watching him week in, week out. So I hope that he can become a good player for us. I just feel worried even having to push and say this, but you know what I mean? I'm not.
No, but in reality, I mean, it's the truth, right? He is a Dortmund player. Nothing we do will change that. And people should be given the space to change and grow to be better individuals. I mean, we're not going to, once again, like you said, it's hard. I feel like we're beating around the bush, right? It's hard not to get into the details of it when talking about it. But at the end of the day, people do deserve a second chance. But the confusion I feel stemmed from people were upset that it was being voiced even initially, right? And I think that you can voice your displeasure in someone's actions, but at the same time, allow them the opportunity to, grow and change. So it's like one doesn't negate the other,
Right.
Yeah.
That was almost a month ago. That signing was announced on the 3rd of July, and even weeks before that, whenever the rumors started cooking up. It's crazy that it's already been that much time passed.
Sorry to rehash everything, but he's our player now.
Yeah.
And then the most recent signing, and I feel like there might have been some youth or younger guys in here. Dortmund, I feel like they always sneakily sign some random youth players anyways that I might be missing. But the obvious other one to be slotting into the first team is Sabitzer, which Carver and I, we texted a little bit, but we haven't talked too much. This is one I'm a lot more excited about. I think it's a good signing. I was always kind of a fan of him at Leipzig. And I know I remember watching the Bayern thing, like him kind of following Nagelsmann to Bayern and then just nothing happening. And him never really getting the chance, which seems surprising following his coach. But at the same time, it's Bayern and like the depth they have, like you really got to push it. But because of like, if I understand if some people might have concerns that he went to Bayern and couldn't get in the team and then transferred out to Man U. But I think that was more of I don't think it was necessarily on him, and maybe it is, but I'm a little more optimistic and pretty excited about this signing.
Well, yeah, Nagelsmann wanted to bring a handful of his players from Leipzig over to Bayern whenever he was moving there himself. So, and then it just obviously didn't pan out, and he had other options. But I mean, I still like this move overall. You were really missing a true warrior in the midfield when you lose a player like Jude Bellingham. So having someone like Sabitzer is obviously not going to fill that void, but it's going to certainly help. It's, again, another very experienced Bundesliga player. All of our transfers this window so far have come from the Bundesliga. Do remember a few pundits, I can't remember who off the top of my head, that I remember them specifically stating that he was the most underrated player in the league a few years back at Leipzig. It is a 4-year deal. And however, my only slightly concern is just this turning into like another 30-year-old plus player that is overpaid and we can't get rid of a few years down the line. But I mean, that's pretty minimal in the back of my mind. I guess just like that's the pessimist almost in the back of my head. But again, he is a good addition to the squad. It shouldn't be the end for this window, though. I think we need to keep pushing, like I said, keep reinvesting into the back line. But I mean, yeah, it's a solid signing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of what you guys have said. I feel like some people are disappointed in the signing, mainly because of the fact that we spent as much as we did on Nemecha. And I know I'm just kind of segueing back into that because I'm actually writing a piece on on like my thoughts on the signing and all that.
Mhm.
And kind of the crux of all that is I feel like people would be more excited if Sabitzer wasn't coming off of almost 2 years of his time playing, or rather not playing, when he should have been, when he was entering his prime. Now he's kind of in it, kind of, I guess, exiting it. And having him come in and likely be the starter, I feel is just the one thing that's kind of the crux in all this. Because I feel like if it had been, another player that came in that we were all really excited about, and then Sabitzer on top of that, I think that would have made people a lot more excited about it.
Right.
Because he is a very versatile player, can play multiple positions, can play as a 10, as an 8, as a 6, in a double pivot, based on his own words.
Right.
So, I mean, I think there would be more excitement if he wasn't looking like he was going to be the main starter. Because let's be honest, like we said, he's a player that has had 2 years where he hasn't necessarily been a top, like a starter for either side that he's played for. And that does have an effect on, a player and their ability to perform. So what I hope is that coming into this new season and this preseason prior to that, is that he can really hit the ground running and show the form and be the player that we saw for Leipzig. Because if we do get that player, then there's every reason to be excited, because, like you guys said, he did it all for Leipzig, basically. So I feel like if we do get that player, that'll be great, and it'll go down as a really, really good signing. And then on top of that, I mean, with the wages, I'm also not worried about that necessarily, because apparently Kale was able to, take his wages and cut them a bit as well from what he was earning at Bayern. So I figure, all in all, it is a good signing. It's just, once again, if there were other signings around that brought out more excitement, I feel like it would be a more exciting signing for people.
Right. I forgot to mention Kale bringing his salary down. I think it was around 10, if not slightly over 10 at Bayern. And then Kale was able to bunk it down to 7.5 or 8 or something like that million euros, if I'm not wrong. And even though he hasn't played a whole lot of football in the last year, even just in the last 365 days, he's still, compared to other midfielders, in the 94th percentile for shots, 87th percentile for non-penalty XG, 81st percentile of non-penalty goals, and then 82nd percentile of aerials won. So, I mean, he's definitely going to be an attacking threat, which anyone who's seen him before, I can see that as well. But of course, he's going to be contributing on the other end and the other side of the ball as well. So we've got a pretty decent, like box-to-box midfielder on our hands. But yeah, like Brian said, I just wish there was some other business going on around that, or likely before that too. But we still got time.
Quick shout out to Brooke G, who did ask about our thoughts on Sabitzer. And then this is probably way too early to even ask this question. I don't know. This is going to be one of those hard ones where it's going to be a hard question to answer this early on, but that's why we love these questions too. Shout out to Andre Swan. Thoughts on who starts, Sabitzer or Mencha, and what other positions do we need to address? But first, on what is this midfield going to look like week 1?
I would imagine it's probably going to be the same that we were seeing before, of the 4-5-1, and then at times 4-3-3, and just having that midfield trio. This time now, it's going to likely be Chan as a single pivot, slightly behind the duo of probably, I would imagine, Brandt, and then take your pick. I mean, I would probably start Sabitzer, but that's just me. I mean, Brian, did you mention that you'd probably have him come off the bench to start, or what are you thinking?
No, I definitely think Sabitzer is going to be starting, and I think that's why he was brought in. What I was saying more so is, I feel like if he had been brought in alongside a different player that was, more exciting and likely to start, I think he would have been a good depth option in that sense. But considering the options we have right now, I definitely feel that Sabitzer is going to be starting, and I think that's kind of the reason he was brought in as well. Because Nemecha is granted, still relatively young. He's had one good season in the Bundesliga. I feel like what they want to do is kind of take the pressure off that price tag that they got him for, and bring in a more experienced player to kind of play that role for now, and then move him more into that role once he's ready. Which I don't think is necessarily a bad strategy.
Right.
It's just, once again, I feel like it would have been, a better signing if circumstances were different.
I mean, Mecha only started 19 games in the Bundesliga last year too. So, I mean, it's not like he's in a completely different boat of not starting a bunch of games last year for their respective clubs. And I just want also off the top of my head, Jake, the young player that we promoted from the second team that you were thinking of was Ale Pullman, who's also kind of a similar player that where you can get higher up the field and play back as well. So he's from the second team, and yeah, we just another promotion. So that was the young player that we were referencing.
Yeah. And looking at, so I know Carver, you mentioned like Sabitzer. We didn't like say his age necessarily. Was I guess my only hesitation going back to him, but because he's 29, so yeah, a little older. Like 4-year deal, it seems like a lot, because as we see in the Marco Reus transition, what's been happening, and so hopefully, like, can he stay healthy? I think that's a big question. But I think not the transition, but the option to, if he's your starter in that position and Mecha can push for that spot and take some time to grow, like you said, Brian, like take a little bit of the pressure off, then that's I mean, hopefully that works out as planned. If that is the plan, it is sad just thinking, like, I don't want to, this is going to be a Jude Bellingham pity party, but as a player who is, we knew we were going to have to sign multiple players to replace him, right? And now that we're here, and now that we have the two players that looks like are going to take over that role, it's like, oh, man, because we say Mitch is young and he's 22, 2 years older than Bellingham. So it's like, oh, dang it.
Right.
One other not a Twitter question, this actually came from Threads. I have not logged into our Threads in a couple weeks because Threads was fun for 2 days, and then it
and it really didn't take off.
But shout out to Stefan or Steven Berkowitz, said, does BVB need to add another starting player to the team before the season begins? And what is our greatest need right now? So yeah, jump in. I know we mentioned fullbacks, mentioned kind of like the midfield situation. Brian, what would, if we could sign a position tomorrow, what would that be and where?
I mean, as of right now, I think it would have to be right back. I think it goes back to the options that we have there at this time, and knowing that, you know, one of them is likely not going to be there going forward. Clearly seems like he's kind of on the periphery. By that I mean Meunier. One has not convinced, being Wolf. Granted, he's had good performances, has not convinced at a consistent level. And then Matteo More being a player that is, you know, consistently injured. I think having that player in that position would be critical, or getting a player in that position rather would be critical. So for me, it would definitely be right back. I mean, there's definitely some options that, you know, Dortmund have already looked at. I mean, Ivan Fresneda, sorry if I mispronounced that. He was an option. Not sure what's going on with that at this point in time. I feel like that rumor's kind of dead in the water. But there are options for Dortmund to look into. I mean, one of the ones that I've seen floating around is Lucho Giltrida.
Yep.
And I think
I was going to mention him too. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I think he would be a really good signing just because, A, I mean, pretty strong, solid defensively. B, also very versatile. Can also play center back and can also play in defensive mid. So I feel like that would be a really good signing to cover our bases, and also provide a starting player in a position that we have dire need of.
I think he's played fullback as well a few times, at least semi-regularly. So he could, you know, really help with all three of those positions, which I think, again, needs to have the most investment here in the squad. Or if not, like we mentioned already, the rumors recently of Vagnoman too, can play right back, can play left back. I think both of those need some sort of addressing at the moment, just because we're one injury away from being in a pretty tight situation. Just like with last year, Jake, how I mentioned with, I think it was towards the end of the season, whenever either Hummels had a knock or Schlotterbeck had a knock. And it's like, I don't know why some people are surprised, given we have 3 center backs right now and we're in 3 competitions. Like there just needs to be more personnel. And I'm not saying we need to buy another starter by any means, because we have, the 3 best German national center backs arguably right now. But there needs to be some sort of help at the moment to kind of cushion, a very aging Hummels. And then, of course, if there's something happens to Sule or Schlotty.
I even saw, is it Koulibaly, who's the young center back? Like, right. He's allowed to leave too. So it's not like they're trying to, it doesn't look like they're trying to ingrate him into the first team at all. So yeah.
We almost committed an absolute war crime getting Koulibaly over to Burnley. I forget what the figure was going to be, something like 15
million.
I mean, man, how we were so close. It looked like it was within hours. of getting done, and I have no idea. I want to get on whatever Burnley was smoking that day, because no idea what they were watching when they were interested in him.
I think he did. I think he did pick up an injury, so that may play a role in why they pulled out of the deal. But I mean, that's kind of been his story as well. From when he was even like younger, pre Dortmund days. I mean, I think when Dortmund signed him, he came in on an injury. So I don't know. I think that might have been it.
And I mean, me bringing him up, I'm not necessarily saying I want to sign a center back right now. We definitely need to sign a center back, but if I'm thinking like first team starter, right back as well. Going back to that question, because that seems like the biggest mystery. Or I mean, another fullback, but center back, we need that. Let's go into Emre Can though, and defensive mid, which maybe we do kind of have some depth there. Emre Can as now captain, and Sally Ocean sitting behind him in that depth position now. With Emre Can, I mean, before I ask you guys your first thoughts, Evan, on him taking the captaincy, Carver and I discussed captaincies so many times. I think Kobel was my main push. A small shout for Schlotterbeck. I think Kobel was my main go-to. I don't think I had Chan like on my radar for it. I think we maybe slightly mentioned him. He wasn't number one on my list. And my only hesitancy is, of course, we saw Chan in great form the second half of the season. But what happens if he slides again is my only concern. And is this going to put more pressure on him? I don't know. But that's my concern, is we've seen so much inconsistency like over the last couple of years. Will he be able to maintain that? Because I feel like as your captain, obviously you want it to be someone who's in, week out, and not out on form.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely my concern. I think my main concern with his captaincy or being named captain is more so whether or not he can keep his composure, because we've known him to be a player that can make a boneheaded mistake, can, leave the team out to dry. Like, I mean, we've seen in the Champions League, giving away stupid penalties, getting in people's faces, getting too aggressive. The hope would be that in him becoming captain now, he recognizes the responsibility in that and is able to tone it back and kind of curb his emotions. Not that we want him to get rid of that entirely, because that's part of what makes him as good of a player and as good of a, personality for the team as he is. He's very emotional. He shows, that he cares. He shows that, or rather, he's not afraid to say what's on his mind. It's just finding that balance. Per his performances, I mean, at this point as captain, he's going to be a player now that's expected to start, expected to be on the pitch more, which means he has to perform. So all we can really hope for is that he continues on that rich vein of form that he had off the second half of the season, really becomes a true monster for us.
I think mentally and physically he has grown a lot in these last, since this calendar year. I mean, in almost every measurable metric, he has improved on. And I think, both of you included, Brian, said that you wanted Kobel as captain as well. And I'd probably put that as well. I mean, just given the leadership qualities that Kobel has, but Chan has a lot of those similar traits. And I think with just his career almost coming full circle now of, I'm not going to go into the history of his career, but I think this could be an opportunity for him to like solidify himself as being a really quality player, and just people abroad too. I want to say these past few months, especially when he faced Chelsea in the Champions League, a lot of pundits were saying, they had no idea that Chan has turned to be this class recently. And I think this giving him the captaincy is going to, have him hold himself to a higher standard. I think he's really hard on himself more than anyone else. So
do we have a vice captain? Is that Kobel?
Yep, that's Kobel.
Or, Sule, if for whatever reason Kobel is not on the field.
Yeah, I think right now what they announced is that Kobel is going to be vice captain at this time. Mm-hmm. So, cool. Which is good. I mean, at least, right? I mean, for me, like you guys have already mentioned, for me, Kobel was the go-to choice. It made the most sense to me to have him be captain. I felt like his personality, disposition, I guess, it towards the media and also disposition towards the club have always been very much like, I'm here for the long haul. And I don't know, that it just seemed like that would be the natural choice. But considering Chen is the choice, got to support him at this point and hope he does as best as he can.
Yeah, and I mean, as like Kobel as vice captain, like I know he is still young. Was the only question for him getting the captaincy now? Like my only question for him getting the captaincy now. So if there's this like year or two period where he gets to serve as vice captain and kind of be on this leadership council and learn and just like grow more, then I think that sets us up for the next time. It's not as much of a debate like who the heck is going to be the captain.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Like it's there for the taking. But I also wouldn't be surprised, like give it a couple of years and Schlotterbeck will be calling for it too. And that's a good problem to have, like just to have two captains essentially, especially the two guys holding it back, saving our butts. So, and then I think just I'm going to use this to transition to my next topic in question. But one thing, like the Chan factor and like the Chan performance lately, like I think a lot of credit goes to Terzic. And so with Terzic backing him and pushing him and encouraging him, I think that's helpful, which leads into Terzic in this upcoming season. And I said it last season, if we're going to like have this project and really like just, if we're going to let Terzic be the coach, let's build this project around him and let him take the reins and not just like dump him after a season if it doesn't quite work out how we wanted it to. And so that's still how I'm feeling. I'm glad there hasn't been any movement or any really talk that I've seen. So I am like, just going to say it now, fully backing Terzic into the season. We'll see if things are slipping halfway through the season. But I think at this point now, like I still say, like, give him another year. Like, look how he was able to turn things around. And I know like some other coaching staff changes happened, in the like during the winter break too, bringing in that new assistant who I should know his name, but I'm blanking right now. But I'm still in the boat of like, let's back Terzic and give him this season too, unless things go horrendously wrong.
I mean, you kind of have to back Terzic and this project at this point, given the club bending over backwards and again disregarding its core values to invest in Terzic this summer. So, I mean, this is the first time that I have, I guess, pulled back slightly from Terzic, but it doesn't mean I'm not backing him still. I just kind of maybe scratch my head a little bit with just some of the decisions that this club has made. But yeah, I mean, you have to invest in Terzic in this next season. It definitely for the first half of it, and see where this project goes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Carver just said is definitely where I stand with it too. You can't switch managers every single season, and I definitely, I think we talked about this last year too. I definitely didn't want Dortmund to become that team that does that, like just wipes the slate clean every single time something happens,
Right.
because that's no way to build consistency. And considering we're signing players that Terzic wants, that he feels fit his vision for how this team should play, at this point in time, the only thing that makes sense is to move forward, obviously. I mean, I don't think it's up for debate at this point, regardless. I don't think there's been anything going on saying like, oh, Terzic is going to be there.
Yeah.
But just to put that out there, like you guys already have, it only makes sense to support him. And at this point in time, there's, once again, no point in changing managers over and over again, because that's not going to build any sort of consistency whatsoever with this side. And I think that's what we said last year too. It's one thing that this side needed the most, consistency. And I feel like at least in the second half of the season, that showed.
Right.
So,
right.
And I think we'll see more of it moving forward in the season to come.
And speaking of the season to come, Carver, well, I want to talk the upcoming preseason matches quickly, but Carver, was there anything else that I might be missing from your notes?
No, I was gonna get into the games coming up before the actual season starts.
Perfect. Well, Dortmund did land. All the boys landed in San Diego, I think, over the last 24
including
hours.
Sabitzer.
Including Sabitzer. I did like as part of their announcement rollout, just included like him packing a Dortmund suitcase with all Dortmund shirts and was like, and this is like the same day. And so they did he signed his paperwork, did all his photo shoots, and then they probably left like literally within 24 to 36 hours of him actually signing. He was able to get on the plane and fly over stateside, which is exciting to see. I know they've already had, I think, two trainings, one or two trainings. I know shout out to some of the New York guys who are out there. And
St. Louis, Carter.
Is
Not
Carter
to be
out
confused
there?
with my name, Carver. Carter was there in San Diego and
Shout out
got
to
some
Brooklyn
photos.
Bruson, man.
Yeah.
And I'm just over here sad that, I mean, but it's really cool to see. I think even today, I mean, we're recording this on Wednesday. This will be out Thursday. But as we were recording this, I saw earlier a photo that all the squad took with all the supporters who are out there watching, which is really cool. And it looks like they're getting access as the guys are walking past to get stuff signed and get some photos, which is really cool. And I know like that's what these preseason tours are kind of about. It's just really cool to see, I guess, with more of the like connection with the guys from New York and everything. It's really cool to see.
Yeah.
But coming up as this is out Thursday night, tonight, maybe as you're listening to this, Dortmund has their first U.S. preseason game against San Diego Loyal. If you're outside of the States, San Diego Loyal is like a Division II team in America. So it probably be similar to, I guess, similar lineups, like maybe younger lineups. And again, it's preseason. So it's getting guys moving. It's getting them working a little bit. But it should be exciting. Watch. It's at 10:30 Eastern time. So Brian, a little late for you.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it'll be a good opportunity for some of the younger players, I think, to get some experience to showcase what they can do. I mean, I don't expect it to be a crazy lineup, also because of all the injuries I feel we have right now. I mean, Reina is out. I believe Daniel Malin and Julian Duranville were also training separately. So I feel like once again, it's just kind of going to be a lot of what we've already seen with regards to the lineup, and yeah, once again, just an opportunity for the youngsters to kind of play with the pros a bit.
Although there is a lot of first team players in the squad that was announced, I was surprised how many. But yeah, it'll be cool to see some other people to get opportunities. And then we have Manchester United after that on the 30th in Las Vegas. I don't know who's going to that one. Jake and I are not, right, Jake? I don't want to speak. You're not going to that one, are you?
No.
Okay.
I was what emails have we been getting that we have a secret trip to Vegas playing, Carver?
Right. Yeah.
We're not that cool.
I got some news for you live on air. And then, of course, Wednesday, the 2nd, we play Chelsea in Chicago. That one we are going to. And we've had a few other people reach out from across the country, really, saying they're going to go as well. So be cool to meet some people. This is the second time I've seen Dortmund play at Soldier Field too. I imagine other people were at the other game, and I think it was 2019 or 18 when we played Man City. That one was a fun one to go to too. So it'll be a good time.
And then just the other mention, I don't think this one is in the States. I'm not sure, but Sunday, August 6th, another preseason friendly against Ajax. But obviously these last few matches ramping up to the season before we start with our Pokal match. But I know I just hope to see a little bit more. Hopefully in these matches, we see a little bit more and maybe a little more what the lineups could be. I know preseason is a lot of like kind of trying to build those partnerships and build the team dynamic you want. You're still going to see a lot of rotation, but I think with matches like Man U and Chelsea, and Ajax coming up too, it's like exciting to see, like, get little nuggets of what the season might actually look like. But Brian, is there anything you're looking for specifically? And Brian, are you making it to any of the games coming up?
I wish. I was going to try and make it to the one in Chicago because that is the closest one.
Right.
But unfortunately, no, I won't be able to make it to any of them. But yeah, I mean, I'm just going to be looking to see, how the new signings are doing, how they fit into the squad, and where they're used necessarily. I mean, we go back to Sabitzer being a versatile player. I'm curious to see where Terzic is going to put him in on the field. Looking at how Nemec is developing and how he's playing, with his teammates and all that. I will be more excited to see a bit more of Julian Duranville, because obviously what we've seen, what we saw from him on the last day of the season was really, really exciting. So I feel like these games, once he's hopefully more fit and able to partake, will be a little bit better of a gauge and a good place for him to showcase what he can do in less stress filled environment. Because obviously coming off the injury that he had when he signed, Dortmund are likely being as careful with him as they can. But yeah, I think in that sort of environment, he can really start to show what he can provide for the rest of the season. So I'm definitely going to be looking for that.
Brian, you mentioned, just in case people don't know who you are, which hopefully they do. More people might know who you are than us, but we appreciate you jumping on here and hanging out. Or at least you might have, if you think you might not know who Brian is, maybe you've read some of his stuff. You mentioned kind of offhand that you're writing some things. So can you tell people what you're writing, how they can find you, where they can find your current work and everything? Just plug yourself.
Sure. I mean, the piece that I was talking about is going to be a bit of a pros and cons thing for the Sabitzer signing. So more obviously on that once that comes out. But generally speaking, I write for BVB Buzz, playing for 90, and Get German Football News.
And as always, all of that will be linked in the description of this podcast. And then you can find us on socials too, because we'll have Brian's @ handles and everything. So make sure you go follow us at the BVB Pod on Twitter and Instagram and Threads.
And on Threads.
Yeah.
suck.
And or if you're just prefer email, you can hit us up, the bvbpodcast@gmail.com. Everything's linked in the description. If I got it wrong, because it's been a while since we've done an episode, just check the description of this podcast. Would be great. But hey, thank you so much for hanging out, listening. It's good to be back. And I don't know when we're going to be back exactly with a full episode, but even though I haven't told Carver this, I think I want to come on after each preseason friendly and just give a little update. Maybe a few thoughts, maybe a short little 10-minute episode. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I say that and then you might not see anything on the feed for a couple weeks, but just follow us on socials for everything. And we appreciate you guys listening. We'll see you later.